Right. Hello. Gabrielle here again. So this I am following on, just give me a sec, I'm just getting my presentation up. Following on from the presentation or the conversation that we had a couple of days ago, on Wednesday it was, where we talked about creating a new relationship with diet and exercise. And today, when I find it, so today's session is called the uncovering your blockers. Okay. So purpose of today's session is just to help you understand more about the reasons why you might sort of struggle to stick with your diet and exercise intentions. You know, there's a lot of good reasons that people have, you know, why they want to create healthier habits for health, you know, feel more energy, just improve well-being. There's a whole raft of things that makes sense for us to eat better, do more movement, sleep better, etc. There's a whole raft of stuff. And the general advice for achieving those things is actually really straightforward. And that's what I talked about on Wednesday, was talking about, you know, how, you know, what's good from a dieting perspective or a nutrition perspective, and from an exercise, particularly at this stage of our lives as sort of perimenopausal and postmenopausal women. So the advice is actually pretty straightforward and actually pretty simple, you know. And the simplest thing is to think about, you know, eating as much unprocessed food as you can and just getting regular movement. You know, it doesn't get an awful lot more complex than that. So the question then I would have is, or I would put to you, or that we'll talk about today, is why do we then struggle to put those healthy habits into action consistently? Because that's something that I know a lot of people struggle with. And what is quite common when you think about, you know, the health sort of things that you want to do, sort of eating better, eating less processed food, people can get really frustrated with themselves when they don't follow that advice. They might have a week where they eat really well and have a good week, which is quite common to talk about. And then something will happen. They go back to the takeaways, or they just sort of eat whatever they might decide is junk food. And they can be really hard on themselves as well. So hopefully today is about taking away the guilt from that, or taking away the idea that you as a person are failing some way, and look around some of the bigger reasons behind why we struggle, why it's so hard to eat a consistently healthy diet, why it's so hard to have a regular exercise routine. Okay, now, just before we go into that in a bit more detail, I just want to talk about what our bodies need now. So we're just sort of going to talk about why it's hard to create those habits, but let's just roll back a sec, because let's see what we're trying to work towards and why we should be working towards those things as well. Okay, so we are, as older adults, it becomes harder. Our bodies are naturally starting to produce less muscle, and overall our muscle mass is getting smaller. Okay, so more protein is really important for older adults, and that includes men and women. It's not just a female thing, but we talk a lot about women's needs these days, but it's true for men and women. We need more protein. When we eat more protein, we get more, it helps to put muscle on our bodies. There's also increasing evidence about having a wide variety of plant-based foods in our diet, specifically because that really helps our gut microbiome. And our gut microbiome is sort of like a newer part of sort of science from a nutrition point of view, and really just starting to understand how that supports our health. But it is linked to a lot of things. Gut health is linked to an improved immune system. It's improved to better digestion and absorption of our food and the nutrients. And the more nutrients that we're going to extract from our diet, the more healthy and more balanced our bodies are. So healthy fats are also important. A lot of the vitamins that we get, that we need to function and to function well, you know, come from healthy sources of fat. And we also need probiotics, which come from things like fermented foods, kefir, natural yogurt, kombucha, sauerkraut. So in a nutshell, that's really what we would be aiming for as a healthier diet with fewer processed foods, you know. And a healthy diet, the 80-20 rule is fine. You don't have to be eating a 100% clean diet, but the bulk of what you have is ideally would follow those rules. And then from an exercise perspective, so if that's what our bodies need now from a food perspective, from a health, from an exercise perspective, we need to think about strength training, because strength training is the best way to build muscle. Okay, none of us have got a lot of time, so it makes sense if we're going to do anything. If we're going to spend our time doing exercise, that we do the things that are going to get us the best results in the time that we have. Okay, so strength training is key. HIIT and plyometric exercise as you're older are more important, because we don't just lose strength and we don't just lose muscle mass, we also lose power. And training for things that are higher intensity, so exercise modalities, can actually help us get more power. Cardio, good for heart, but that can come from walking up hills. So that's a very, very easy thing for most of us to get into our routine. And then also to pay attention to stretching, flexibility, because again, that starts to go. We lose the flexibility as we get older, but it's quite easy to make improvements in flexibility by having a regular stretching routine. On the flip side of all that activity, we also need to have good quality rest and recovery, because our bodies adapt to the exercise that we do when we're not doing it. And one of the things that it's quite easy or quite common for people to fall into a trap of is thinking that the more is better when it comes to exercise. So wanting to exercise more every day, twice a day, doing stuff constantly. And really, that's not true. We also need good quality sleep. It's actually when we're asleep that we rebuild the muscle that we have. So scheduling in days where we're resting and where we're recovering and just doing really gentle movement is absolutely fine, and more than fine, I'd say essential. And the other side of the other aspect to that is stress management. I think, all of us would say we live stressful lives. I think that's just the norm these days. And stress is a really insidious, really has really bad effects on us, and it really creeps up. And I don't think we realise what stress is doing to us from the inside. It's linked to an awful lots of things. It's linked to sort of muscular pains, because we can hold stress in our bodies. It's linked to worse sleep, anxiety. It's linked to an increase in depression, and even in things like high blood pressure, hypertension, etc. So looking at how we reduce the amount of stress in our lives is really important. So I've just given a big long list of things we should be doing. And sometimes I think that's part of the problem, because we're trying to do so many different things in our lives. And then we've got this big long list of healthy things that we should be doing, which is another source of worry. But let's just think this is a set of things that we're trying to we acknowledge that would be good for us to do in some capacity in our lives, or build up to that over time. But what happens when we fail? So that's what I want to just sort of talk about now. When we fail at those things, when we don't manage to do our exercise 3 times a week, or we can't get a gym habit going, or we're not getting early nights, or we're not eating enough protein and we're eating too much toast or junk food or whatever, how do we behave? Very often we don't just think, oh, it's been a tough week, end of story. There's a lot of self-criticism. There's a lot of judging about ourselves. I speak to women all the time who describe themselves as lazy, as unmotivated, have no willpower, and we use language to describe ourselves that's really negative, okay, and gives ourselves a really hard time. There can be a lot of guilt and shame. Mostly I'm speaking to women about these things, but they can feel quite embarrassed to talk about their eating habits, and as if they sort of feel guilty and embarrassed by eating chocolate or having had a couple of glasses of wine last night, and what want to think about today, and the purpose of today, is to sort of take a step back from that. So rather than thinking that you always need to be giving yourself a hard time about failing to achieve these ideals or these shoulds, the question is, what can we learn about ourselves if we look at the fact that we're struggling through a different lens, being through a lens of being kinder to ourselves and thinking, all right, okay, yeah, that's been tough. What's going on here? And start to get curious about that situation. What is it that's behind why we're struggling? That's what I want to talk about today. Because, you know, if you pick up any magazine or social media, there's always lots of things that we should be doing. There's never any shortage of all the things we should be doing. What there's a real shortage of is a conversation around why it's actually really hard and why we struggle. And then beyond that, what are the reasons behind those? You know, what are the actual reasons that we're struggling to do, you know, put these practices in place? And I call them your blockers. So I talk about how you might identify the blockers, the things that are happening in your life that get in the way of you eating or exercising in a way that you would aspire to, okay? Because you know it would be a healthful, positive thing to do. This isn't an exhaustive list by any means, but it covers a lot of the basis and there is a lot of overlap, but it would include things like menopause. I'm going to go into these in more detail. The fact that you're just too busy or too stressed, the fact that you're too focused on other people, or you've lost the ability to prioritize yourself. Emotional eating can be a big issue. So people can use eating to distract themselves from emotions or from another issue that they need to address. You can have friends and family sabotage your efforts. You know, so people who discourage you from eating well or try and tempt you or try and put pressure on you when you go out to not stick to your plans. Then something that I call advertiser's dream, where we're falling for the marketing and the special offers and the adverts of food manufacturers and retailers. And then lastly, an idea that dieting mentality just doesn't motivate us anymore. And we want to start to leave that behind. So that can be something that gets in the way of us eating healthily because we've sort of fed up with the idea of having to have been on a diet all our lives. So I'm going to dig into each of those in a little bit more detail. So let's just start with menopause, okay? So key things with menopause that can impact our ability to eat a sort of an overall healthy diet and exercise. Well, firstly, lack of sleep. So it's really common for people to start struggling with their sleep at this stage of your life. And we know, you know, this is fact based on sort of studies that when you have a bad sleep, you eat more calories the next day, and you also are more likely to choose less healthy food than if you'd had a good sleep. So you'll want more junk food, more sugar, and more of it. Okay. And, you know, if you had the odd bad night's sleep, fine, it's not going to make much difference. But if you're routinely having poor sleep, then you can see how those extra calories start to build up over time and the habits start to erode. Women can also find that they go through have a lot of muscle pains and joint pain, which can make exercise and movement painful. So that's an issue. Energy levels can drop, so you really don't feel like you've got the energy left. You know, particularly if your life generally is very busy, you haven't really got any spare then to go out for a walk or exercise. There's another thing that I think is quite important here is that there's also a sort of a pleasure motivation imbalance. So human beings, not just women, but human beings need to get pleasure from hard work for us to stay motivated to do it. Okay. So if you think you sort of spend hours in the kitchen making a really elaborate meal, it's hard work, there's loads of washing up, but you have a fantastic meal, you might have friends and family there, there's an awful lot of pleasure that you get from that meal. So the motivation is, well, all that effort, those hours that I spent in the kitchen are fine, they are worth it because I've really enjoyed myself. What happens with in perimenopause and menopause is that we don't feel the same pleasure or highs as we did before. That starts to become tempered. So and that can be anything, not just food. Maybe that wasn't the best example to use, but if you get pleasure from watching a TV program, sitting on the sofa, chatting with your friends, going out for meals, the things that used to make you feel happy and give you satisfaction in your life actually can start to not be there. So your overall mood can stop. And people talk about it having this sort of feeling of the colour going out the life or the joy going out the life, because you just don't get the same. It's when you talk about having lost your mojo. So suddenly all the nice bits of your life have sort of the intensity's turned right down, but all the work that you've got to do is still there. And if not more, because you might be feeling more stressed, you might be struggling with lack of sleep. So suddenly all the work and all the effort that you have to do in your life is still there, or maybe even getting harder. but the pleasure side is damped down. And what happens then is you need to find some pleasure. You know, there's a real basic need that we have as human beings to get those little highs, get those kicks. And what's the quickest, easiest, cheapest, fastest way to, most guaranteed way to get a hit of pleasure? Well, it's probably from a bar of chocolate or a glass of wine or biscuit, whatever it is, your thing. So food can become something then that really starts to be what I call a pleasure substitute, because it's a very easily accessible thing that we can have to help us sort of just get that little bit of respite in the day from all the stress, from all the hard work, from all the overwhelm. So that can be what's happening. Food can also be something that we use as a distraction technique. I mean, I know myself, if I'm sort of struggling at work, or I feel anxious about something, or I can't settle, and I don't feel, you know, I just don't think it's a nice feeling, and I notice, you know, through time, that's when I'll sort of head in the kitchen and just think, what can I have? Because I don't like that anxiety or that sort of weird feeling of not being sure of myself. We can also use food to push down more uncomfortable things. You know, it's a big time of change, menopause. So there might be other bigger issues that you might be struggling with. People struggle with relationships. They struggle with, you know, parents being older, with teenagers, maybe getting fed up with a career, a whole load of things. And food can be something that we use then to plug that gap, to sort of distract us from these difficult feelings of things that are big in our lives, but we don't really feel like we can change. So that's can be part of what menopause can do. Menopause can mean that we're also more stressed just by menopause, but also by the symptoms of menopause, and we're also less able to deal with stress. So is that a double whammy or a triple whammy? It's not great, whatever it is. And one of the things that happens when we've got too much on our plate is that we have what's called decision fatigue. And everything that you know, if you think about getting up in the day, every time your kid asks you something, or your partner or your boss, every time you get a text or an email, you have to make a decision about something. And we only have a certain amount of capacity to make decisions throughout the day before our brains start to get really tired of it. So if you've ever got to the end of the day and known that you need to think about what's for tea, and you think, or you don't think more at the point, and you just think, I don't actually know what to have. And you feel that your processing capacity of your brain has just gone. Man, you know, it can happen sooner. It happens to me at lunchtime a lot. I literally can stand there and think, what shall I have for lunch? And I've just got no idea. And I can't work it out. So what happens in that situation is we go for an easy or an automatic option. So the food that's in front of us in the fridge, the packet of cereal, the toast, you know, we don't have the thinking capacity to think, organize a set of ingredients to make something like a salad or something that's a bit more elaborate than that. We just go making the easy decision, or doing the takeaway, or doing the delivery. And that's a real thing, that we don't have the capacity to make a healthier choice, make the choice to go for the walk. We just can't think anymore. So we go to a default action of easy convenience food, or sitting back on the sofa because we're just worn out. So that's something that can be a real factor of when we're really stressed and overwhelmed. We can't think enough to make the decisions. Another sort of category of blockers is the idea of prioritizing others. Now, this is quite common if you have family, children, a partner, and they might have different ideas about the food that they want to eat versus you. So again, this has just been a recurring theme with women that I've coached, where the kids want to eat a certain way, and they know, and the husbands or both, and they know that that type of food isn't what they want to be eating, or isn't making them feel like the best. But the kids or the partners or both won't budge. So the choice is either eat what they're eating or make 2 dinners. What would you do? I know what I'd do. It wouldn't be making 2 dinners. So, and even if you did make 2 dinners, this can be a thing that people think, oh, I'm on a diet, and they'll make 2 dinners for a few days, and then they just think, well, this is far too much work. So you've got too much work, you haven't got the pleasure of it. You're sat there eating a salad while your family are all sat there oblivious to how much work you've put in, eating pizza and chips, and you feel hard done by. So the pleasure's not there. So the motivation to keep doing that is not gonna last. Another thing that I see a lot with women as well is that they'll be running around after the kids. I've only got one, so it's not so bad. But that can be something where they, come home from work, make the tea, run round after the kids all night, and literally there's no time for themselves. So they could have otherwise maybe done some exercise or gone to the gym, but they don't feel like they can leave the house in case someone needs them. And therefore they can't make that time for them to step outside and go and do some exercise. I talked about sabotage actually, as well, which is something that comes up quite regularly, which isn't very nice at all, where you're trying to eat a healthier diet, but someone, that you see a lot in your life, partner, family, parents, friends, are trying to tempt you away from that. So I remember one client that I worked with, and she did need to lose weight for some real serious health reasons actually. And she was really doing well with making changes, and she was feeling really good about making changes because she was feeling so much better. She was doing things for herself, and her husband would come home from work at the night with a load of chocolate and sweets and want to sit on the sofa with her and eat all this stuff, and she felt really guilty that she was saying no and ended up eating them. And he I don't know, can't speculate, but maybe he felt like he didn't want her to be on a diet without him, or what have you, I don't know. But you've all come across that situation where you'll go out with people and give you a hard time for not choosing a dessert or not drinking. So this idea of sabotage can be really quite destructive and can stop people from doing the things that they want. A real typical thing for women is just to not make time for themselves. If you've listened to any of my podcasts, a few of the women that I've sort of coached on those, they'll be just grabbing little bits of food for themselves all day long because they don't have time or don't make time to make themselves a proper meal and end up starving later on. Sometimes the reason we can't, sometimes the reason that our diets aren't what they want to be is the fact that we just simply get into bad habits. So we always have the biscuit with our coffee. We always buy something at the petrol station. We want to have a dessert after one meal and then after every meal. And it just sort of builds up. So that's something to just watch out for. And then the last one I want to talk about is the idea of, or just being aware of the tactics that supermarkets and marketing companies use to make us buy their products. Now, one of the reasons that people find that they love junk food and enjoy eating it and also eat more of it than they want to, as in more volume and therefore more calories, is processed food has a lot less nutrition in it, and our bodies are craving nutrition, particularly protein. So if you're not getting enough protein in the food that you're eating, because the takeaway pizza's probably got hardly any in it, or crisps or whatever it would be, there's a theory now that your body says, right, you've eaten enough calories for your daily needs, but I'm still short on protein, so keep eating, and you eat more and more and more. So this is one of the reasons why processed and ultra-processed food aren't so good for us, because they've not got enough nutrition in. So we have to eat more of it to meet our nutritional needs, but then we end up having too many calories. So you'll go in a supermarket, you've got the 3 for 2s and the special offers, and the kids see advertisements for apps and Just Eat and things like that. And they know how to target us. They know when we're hungry. They know when we're running out of steam and we want a quick decision or we want convenience, and they target us so that we see those messages then. So you do have to be mindful of that, because those forces, those advertising and market forces, are really well studied, and they know, the advertisers know what your habits are, and they're taking advantage of those with their marketing to try and get you to buy them. Okay. So hopefully you can see that there's a lot of stuff going on that's not just about you being lazy or unmotivated or having no willpower. There's a whole raft of factors that are working to undermine your ideas about exercise or your ideas about eating a healthier diet. There's so much stuff. The last one I want to talk about is the idea of being a dieting rebel, because a lot of us, and I'm certainly one of them. I think I said yesterday or Wednesday when I spoke, I was 13 the first time I went on a diet, when someone told me I looked like I was putting on weight as a 13-year-old. And you have that up, and it's decades, and you do get to a point, and I've sort of had lots of conversations with women about this, where you just feel like so fed up with it, and you become what I call a dieting rebel. You rebel against that whole idea of diet culture and rules. And certainly in menopause, there can be a feeling of, I know I should be eating this healthier food, but I'm going to eat the cake or the biscuits anyway. I don't care. And sort of part of that is the menopause factor of just sort of needing that pleasure. Part of it's the idea that you just think, I'm so tired of all the rules and restrictions that I've put on my life, or put on my eating habits all my life. I can't be bothered anymore. And I think we also start to feel that we're not motivated so much by weight loss anymore, or we start to maybe make peace with our bodies as they are, and just don't want to be trying to change, and we're just sick of that mindset. But what that can do, is skew our eating in a different way, because you're almost rebelling by eating rubbish. And, this isn't always, this doesn't just have to be a conversation about body size or weight. You feel better when you're eating healthier food, because you've got more energy, your digestion's better, you sleep better, your moods are stabilized, your hunger's stabilized. When we're not eating food in the right way, it actually affects our hunger levels, our hunger hormones, and we can feel full but still be craving, and it's not a nice space to be. But maybe just what we're trying to achieve gets a bit skewed in our brains. We don't want to be on a diet anymore. So what do? Is it just a free-for-all? But then we feel rubbish and lethargic. So we start to sort of get mixed up about what our goals are. So that's quite a lot there, and I don't want to make this presentation or this conversation today too long and too onerous, because I'm going to sort of tackle this is a series of conversations, and I'm going to pick up on this next week, because all I wanted today for you to do today was to be able to sort of take a step back from maybe blaming yourself for your lack of motivation or willpower or ability to eat healthily or get exercise in. And rather than thinking you're at fault, I hope that today you've been able to think, okay, I can see now that there's lots of reasons why it's so hard, so that you're giving yourself an easier time and stopping the guilt, the blame, the shame, the negativity, and start to think, okay, I've heard all of these things today. Which are mine? Which are my blockers? Okay, because we're all different. We'll all have some version of these things. What is it that stops you from eating that healthier diet, maintaining or starting that exercise regime? What is it? And sometimes it might be a complex thing. Sometimes there may be one or two. It might be just something really simple, that your sleep's just awful and you just don't have the capacity or don't feel like you have the capacity. So the first change that you might be looking at is to get some time, get some support to try and help with your sleep. So moving forwards, okay, you want to think about, take a little bit of time away from after this to figure out what your personal blockers are. What's holding you back? What are the things that get in your way of your intentions to eat better, to exercise? My next question to you is, become aware of where you are on your priority list of things to do. And when I say where you are, be really truthful, because I hear a lot of women, and I'm talking about people I've coached and clients over the past few years, they're really not their own priority. Everything is coming before them, their families, their careers, the PTA, whatever it would be. And when I listen to all the things that they have on and their commitments, they just never have a second for themselves. And that's really key, because you can't make those changes if you don't have the time or the energy or the mental headspace to figure out what it is that you need. So where are you on that priority list? Okay. And if you're really far down the list, why? Why is everything else so important? People want to change on one hand, but two, they just want to find a way of doing more keeping everything, keeping all the other plates spinning, but then just make that other plate spin that's about themselves. That's not possible. You've got to take a good hard look at what you've got going on in your life and see how you can let some things go, because really you don't, by this stage of your life, you just really don't have capacity to add something else in. And setting up new diet and exercise habits takes work, takes effort. There's no getting around that. Next thing is to take some time to figure out what your real goals are now. What is truly important to you at this point in your life? I've talked about dieting before because probably 99% of the women who come to me and at some point they'll say they want to lose weight. Hardly any of them do. And the reason is because of these blockers. But one of the reasons is because actually they don't care. They don't want to lose weight. They realize that they might have been a size 8 when they got married, but they're not going to be now. And they're actually all right with that, you know, but they haven't figured that out in the brain. They haven't made that connection. They've figured out that, you know, they're still following the idea that they should be, as in, and should is very different to really wanting. Yeah. So they think they should be a size 8, but when you really dig in, they're not bothered. So if you want to make changes to your life, which I said are hard because things are difficult, you know, setting up new food habits, getting used to new menu planning and all the rest of it, finding time to exercise, you have to have a goal that really motivates you. And if weight loss isn't one of them, then it's not going to work. But there's a lot of things, there's a lot of benefits, really big benefits from having a healthier diet, having health, getting exercise in, more energy, you know, more self-confidence, sleeping better, better moods. There's a whole raft of things that's worth making changes for when you realize. And also, if you think, why do I want that extra energy? If you want to go and have a great life and enjoy stuff and have adventures and, you know, embrace the years ahead, then that can be a bigger motivation than going back to being a size 8 and miserable. So think about what your real goals are now, what's truly important to you now, and really think about that. The flip side to that, because sometimes just having a goal isn't enough to motivate people to make changes. But if you think about the alternatives, what are the implications of ignoring those goals and continuing to neglect yourself? You know, I have sadly met women in my career as a personal trainer who absolutely who are wonderful, wonderful people who absolutely make martyrs of themselves and just would rather have a clean house than be healthy. And I see how much they suffer later on in, you know, at some point, because they can't make the time for themselves and really do the work, make the changes that are going to support them. And it's absolutely so painful for me to see sometimes when people's health and mobility and energy levels have suffered because they can't set some boundaries and say, no, I'm going to be doing this for me first. They just end up so worn out and depleted, they haven't got the capacity to do stuff for themselves. And it's really, really tough to see. Now, yesterday or the day before, I did talk about the fact that, you know, it might feel like there's a lot to change, but at this stage of your life, I'm not selling you or suggesting that you need to be on a 4-week plan and everything changes in 4 weeks. I'm really vehemently against that, because again, with dieting culture, we've got this idea that we just need to change everything in 4 weeks, which is also rubbish. So small changes are really, really effective. So let's think about, you know, you've spent some time looking at your blockers, thinking of how well you do or don't prioritize yourself right now, thinking about what your real goals are, you know, what's really important to you, what will happen if, and how will you feel if you don't make some changes. The next thing to look at is, well, what are the small changes that you can start to make? And it might not be that the first change is to change your diet. The first change might be, you know, don't always go down the diet first route. It might be you need less stress. You need to set some boundaries. You need to get some sleep. You need a bit of time to yourself. Maybe they're the things that have to happen first, so you can get a little bit more energy, a little less brain fog, a little more thinking power. Then you can start thinking about, what can I do for myself? Can I get out for a walk a couple of times a week? Can I, you know, make a healthy breakfast? And then focus on those small changes that build up. Play the long game. Let's not try and overhaul everything all in one go, because it's just far too stressful. It just really doesn't work. So that's what I want to leave you with today. That's long enough, I think, because the next time, next week, next Wednesday at 1:30 p.m, we're going to talk a little bit more practically about, well, what are the things that you can do to start to find more time for you? You know, setting some boundaries, learning to say no. We know that we need to make some space in our lives if we're going to do these things that are going to help us feel healthier, you know, improve our well-being. We've now got to take some pretty brave steps to start finding that time, carving that time out of very busy, hectic lives, so that we can do some good things for ourselves. So that's next week, but you might find some over the weekend. Hopefully, now you've watched this, it might inspire you to have a look. So thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed. That session. I hope it's given you a little bit of food for thought. Have a lovely Friday. Have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you soon. All right, bye.